This is Robert Ashley, and on behalf of the Pertinent Press of Oxford, I welcome Miss Pooja Soni. She is an independent researcher based in Karnataka, India, and she studies chemical engineering at Visvesvaraya Technical in the university, and currently pursues her interest in consciousness research. Her writing has been published in the Indian Association of Health, Research and Welfare in its quarterly peer-reviewed International Journal of Social Science Review. In light of her accumulated experience over the years, she was persuaded to write this book about consciousness. And in her free time, she likes cycling and cooking, but that's enjoyable, very enjoyable. And her first book, published by the Pertinent Press, details a new theory of consciousness, which is intended to unify divergent views of consciousness, starting from materialism, dualism, monism, idealism, and different kinds of panpsychism. Now, we are going to kick off with the first question. Ms. Soni, what is your book about?
My book is about a new theory of consciousness. It is basically intended to solve the meta problem of consciousness formulated by philosopher David Chalmers. The meta problem of consciousness is basically a question which needs to be answered. Basically, the question is to explain how we develop over the course of experience and how we get to the stage in our lives and start to question the existence of consciousness and start to answer it with our different theories. So that is exactly what I do in my book. It is a theory which explains how even a non-living entity, such as a rock, could develop itself into a human being, into a sentient human being, and ask the question of why consciousness exists and how it is important and why it is a problem to be solved. The inspiration behind writing the book came from the idea that the duality in existence doesn't exist in the materiality of things. It exists in the duality of experience in itself, experience of qualia or quale as we know it. So basically the intent is to unify the different views about positive and negative outlooks about experiences. For instance, I present the idea that aggression is an experience intended to not hurt the other person, but to escape from the person. Positive experiences are experiences which preserve the substrate of self or essence of beingness, as I call it. I define the self much like Aristotle describes the soul. Self is the self-referential quality that exists in every entity that exists and every thought that could be conceived of. So basically the idea of the self emerges from the law of identity, which says A is equal to A. A is equal to A only when the change the A accommodates over time finds itself in its future state. For instance, we could say A is equal to A only when you project the essence of A-ness over the future state of the A, and then you recognize that the A-ness or the essence of the A-ness is preserved in both the states. So self, as I describe it, works in a similar fashion. A self is any entity which which exists with a form, which has a physical form, which could be preserved over the course of its experience. So my book is all about a story about experience, and the inspiration about inspiration behind writing the book is that I try to unify the different divergent views about positive and negative experiences. I make a claim that you cannot experience new experiences unless you experience the good and the bad side of the same experience. For example, I could give you an example. In level 2 of my theory, there are reflexes which merge, which are shown to merge to form emotions in level 3. And the valence in emotions has to has to be dissolved for the self to jump to the next level of experience, that is locomotion. So in this sense, negative experiences are described as a stepping stone for progress in experiencing new experiences. I define God as the domain of maximum possible experiences, and every entity is described to strive to be like God by maximizing its experiences.
Right.
So the structure of emergence that I described here has one condition. There has to be merger of different kinds of experiences, the positive and negative kinds of experiences. It could be a reflex action, it could be an emotion, it could be locomotion, it could be movement, bodily movement, it could be positive thoughts and negative thoughts. So basically there has to be merger for there to be an emergence of new kind of experience in the next level.
Okay.
So the story is basically about experience and how we develop over the course of life to acquire new and new experiences. So it is a story about an embryo which grows and becomes a human being who could question the very nature of existence and ask questions about existence, God, and even consciousness. So, yeah.
That's quite an in-depth answer, actually. So this book, who would it be intended for, actually?
It is intended for brain scientists who believe that consciousness is dependent on the brain structure,
Mm-hmm.
because I explain that the brain is the facilitator of movement or change, without which you cannot have any sort of experience for that matter. The brain is the facilitator of movement or change, which is fundamental to the nature of any kind of experience that we experience as human beings, as entities of all sorts. So even a plant needs something like a brain to experience what it experiences over the course of its existence. So my book is also intended for panpsychists, because I describe the self as this unit which exists everywhere in everything. So there is sentience. So by saying that there is sentience in everything that exists, I am in favor of panpsychists. It is intended for idealists because idealists suppose that all is mentality. And I say that for mentality to exist, there has to be a choice-making ability. There has to be a substrate of self which could in a way have both bodily and mental experiences in its structure. by explaining that the mind emerges from the body. I am in favor of idealists. It should, my book is intended for dualists who say that mind and body are different things. I agree with them by saying that mind is basically the assumption the body makes about the nature of experience, and I support my claim by showing that mind emerges in the experience of emotion, where the body reacts in four axis ways, where the body imagines the false nature of the stimulus around. And my book is intended for spiritual people and religious people because I talk about God in a very phenomenological way by saying that God is the domain of all possible experiences, and we as experiencers strive to be like God because we try to maximize the number of experiences that we experience. So basically, it is a story which tries to unify all the divergent views about consciousness that exist and tries to say that we don't have to be in different camps. It's time we could unite together and frame a new theory of consciousness which has something for idealists, has something for panpsychists, for materialists, and even for spiritual people. So yeah, this my book is intended to developmental psychologists because I take inspiration from Piaget's developmental theory. Yeah.
That's actually quite a beautiful ending on that question, the unification. Actually, who inspired you to make this leap, to make this work, this dedication to this book of yours?
Personal experiences. I think no one can write a book unless your own experiences inspire you.
Mm-hmm.
So that is one thing. The second is I have read a few eye-opening books. One of them is How to Create a Mind by Ray Kurzweil.
Mm-hmm.
The work of Paul Ekman in the field of facial expression. Noam Chomsky's work about language, theory of language, and Metaphors We Live by George Lakoff. J.J. Gibson's book, Senses Considered as Perceptual Systems. I think this book has inspired me to think that what exists in this entire existence is positive and negative or persist and escape kind of interactions which are intended to preserve what we are. What we are is the essence. The essence is preserved through positive or persist and escape interactions. So basically the idea is to say that evil exists as opposed to good because evil does the same thing as good does. The only thing is we have, we as a society have progressed to think about evil in such a different way that we forget its importance in giving meaning to the good kind of experiences that we go through in our lives. So this was basically the inspiration, and traveling across the country uh, has inspired me, and thinking about life and death, depression and having a good life, thinking about happiness and sadness, I think has inspired me in writing this book.
Well, that's quite moving. Actually, here's moving on to the fourth question. How is your book any different from others on this topic? I mean, there must be some aspects here that are different.
My book is different from other books because uh, it's not radically different. Let's say I am not the first person writing a good book about consciousness. There are a lot of books and so much good research going on in the field of consciousness. But most of the books try to locate consciousness by saying that consciousness exists in the body, in the brain. Some say consciousness exists in the domain of God. Some say some theories are in support of the idea that consciousness is located somewhere. Consciousness has to be something from which all of existence comes into being. So most of the books which are about consciousness try to locate consciousness somewhere,
Mhm.
as opposed to my book, which tries to encompass everything that exists within this circle of consciousness, which has an emergent structure that we call consciousness or even life itself. But then we would have to expand our understanding of life to say that life is synonymous with consciousness or having or being or having a self, because once you think of consciousness as being similar to life, we will have to expand sentience to non-living things. So yeah, other books are different from my book because I do not try to locate consciousness in the body or in the universe. I just say that it is located in how beautifully one experience that we experience changes into a new kind of experience. It's that beauty that we see in experiences changing into experiences, in how we grow in life. This is where consciousness lies, and experience is where we should look for consciousness.
That's very good. Well, thank you very, very much,
Thank
Miss
you.
Soni, for this interview. And
Thank you so much.
well, I hope that our readers will be able to enjoy your book very soon. And then,
Thank you so much.
thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
You too.